r/AskReddit. Fathers of Reddit, when did you decide you wanted your daughter's boyfriend to someday become your son-in-law? I, male, 27, had an 8-year relationship with my ex-GF before she dumped me for another guy. We lived together in an apartment, and I had a pretty cool relationship with her dad. I was terribly afraid of the day she was going to move out of our shared flat, so I hid for 2 days at my friend's flat, or when I was at home, in my room with closed doors, and played video games all day long. When they moved out the last bit of furniture that was left, someone knocked on my door. I hoped it could be my ex-GF saying something nice for our goodbye, because it was a terrible and really emotional/angry end of a relationship, but it was not her, but her dad. He asked if he can come in, and I was stunned, but told him sure. He closed the door behind him, hugged me the first time ever, and started to cry, while telling me I hope you know you did nothing wrong, and I hope you'll find a girl which doesn't shatter your heart. You deserve so much better, and I hope my daughter will understand one day what she done to you. You are a beautiful human being, and I'd be proud to call you my son-in-law. I cried like a baby, and hugged him too. It was the nicest thing anyone in my life ever told me, and it was insanely helpful to hear something that nice and unexpected. Well, we doing sons girlfriends too? Cause I have an answer for that one. My sons were both extremely awkward kids. Nerds as most would put it, both in terms of academic achievement and social skills. The idea of either dating let alone getting married was a long shot, even through college. Then one day, my older son comes home and awkwardly says he has a request. There is a girl he wants to bring to Thanksgiving. Sure, son. Gotta encourage that behavior, of course. I was excited to meet her. About this time my boy also began reffing football. I would occasionally go to games at random high schools to watch him. One such game mid-November, I remember some booing at a ref call. It was a tough call, but it was, in my biased opinion, the right one. But you know how it goes. Call against the home team, parents, and friends are gonna boo. I cannot emphasize exactly how awkward and unconfident my son was. It was hard to watch a crowd boo him. Then I heard a shout from the stands lower down. Good call, ref. This young woman, maybe 20 by my estimation, started an entire cheering section for the ref that lasted until the next snap. Well, you can imagine then my feelings about this girl when she sat down 2 weeks later to Thanksgiving dinner. This was a girl who truly supported my son. And 18 years later, still happily married and with 5 kids. My son is a successful software developer for some government contractor. I owe a lot of that to the confidence he gained from a woman who saw his worth past his shyness. Now, if only my younger son had gotten that, instead of the string of abusers and leeches that he went through before he gave up dating altogether. I'm the son-in-law, and in the spirit of not answering the original question, I had a moment where I knew I wanted my girlfriend's dad to be my father-in-law. It was simple enough. We were going to pick up a used piano from some folks who were moving and didn't want it anymore. He introduced me to the piano owner as basically his son-in-law. That felt good after 6 years loving his daughter and feeling pretty iced out by my own father. My religious father was mad at my Phil for letting his daughter and I be sexually active. Once we put the piano in the house, my Phil took me home and asked me to send my father out. I stayed near the door to overhear their conversation. He said I was a fine young man and he looked forward to the day I would become an official part of his family, that there was no doubt in his mind that I would marry his daughter and have a long and happy marriage, and that there was no good reason why my father and he couldn't at least get along. My Phil put the success and happiness of his daughter's future marriage above his own pride and tried to forget the awful things my father had said to and about him and his wife. A fine man to look up to. When I saw Guardians 2 and Yondu had that father vs daddy line, I looked a few seats down at my Phil and felt real happy to have him around. I'm the fiancé. Her dad told her afterwards how he liked me. My fiancé was moving to south of Germany for a 6 months university study program, so me and her dad I've met only once went with her to carry her luggages and help her to move there. So we took the bus from France, 18h of bus. We wait in Zurich for 4 hours, from 12 p.m. to 4 a.m. in Renti and cold train station, to take a second bus etc. When we arrived in this little German city, we all slept in this tiny apartment. It was kind of odd to sleep on the floor with her dad, that I only met once. Anyway, the next morning we had to leave and take the train, to go back to France for 8h straight. Her father is blind in his left eye, and had a work accident recently, so he had some struggle to walk. Our train was late, so we could not take the next one at the France's border. We wait 2 extra hours in the cold to have the next train, exchange the tickets myself, because he has struggled to speak English, he's Indian, take another train and so on. We've made 12h of trains instead of 8. I took care of him the whole time to make sure that he can seat and rest his left leg, buy him food etc. Try to do my best to speak with him and understand each other because of his half Indian / half French accent, and we had a very good time in the end. Told me about his life in India, his family etc. When he came back at home he called my fiancée and said that he wanted me, the nice white guy, to be her husband. Living the life since then, glad that all those things happened. I'm the daughter, but my father told me the moment was when my now fiancé asked him and my stepmom out to lunch. They always loved him. He's a talented and successful actor. He's caring and thoughtful, has the best sense of humor, and he includes them in his life, as if they were his own parents. They all sat down, and they were waiting expectantly for him to ask for permission, for lack of a better word, to ask me to marry him. My fiancé looked down at his feet, and sighed heavily. My dad said he looked nervous, and could barely speak. John, Linda, I have something to tell you. I'm gay. This of course was to break the tension and they all had a good laugh about it. My dad thought that shit was hilarious. And my dad said it was totally alright. Son-in-law here. I was raised primarily by my grandparents growing up. They were both diabetic and had heart problems, old people problems. I used to smoke and drink way back when. Nothing crazy, and wife's parents hated my fucking guts because I was corrupting their daughter. We had gone to a party and she didn't have her phone, and they were frantically trying to get a hold of her for something. My phone was dead, so they had called my grandparents' house to see if they knew where I was. My grandpa answered the phone and said he didn't know where we were, but that I would be home by 11. Her dad questioned that and started talking about how I'm a bad influence on her because I drink and smoke and am a degenerate. To which my grandpa replied, while we may not be aware of his activities away from home, I do know that he spends a large portion of his free time helping and taking care of us. He has never missed taking us to a doctor's appointment or helping us grocery shop each week. The next week I was over, her dad said he was going to the store and asked if I would go with him. I obliged. He told me in the car that he understood the commitment I had to taking care of my grandparents and was glad his daughter was with someone who was committed to putting others before themselves. I proposed about a year and a half later. My grandma died 6 months before the wedding, and my grandpa about a year after that. Her dad remains a friend to me, and not just my fiel. I'm the soon-to-be son-in-law here. Father-in-law told me the moment he knew I right for his daughter, and that I would be joining the family. She was my GF at the time. We were both in college. She was accepted to a year-long study abroad program to Japan. She left and we had sad goodbyes. At this point we've been together 4 years. I've been deployed before, so we were used to having a long distance relationship from time to time. About halfway through her study abroad program, we all went to visit her. The first thing that gets mentioned is that I picked up another job, so I could afford a plane ticket to see her with her family. I insisted on paying for my own ticket and stay. Her father knew I didn't make a lot of money and this was a big thing for me. He agreed to let me pay for the plane ticket, but he insisted on paying for everything else. We went all over the place, and he paid for everything. I always offered, but he always pushed my card away when I tried to pay. Now, my GF is not the most emotionally expressive person. She's quite cute, petite, with some witty comebacks from time to time. She very logical and doesn't like showing her emotions that much. But when I was there, she couldn't get enough of me, not trying to brag. She was super excited to show me everything and never wanted to leave my side. She also gets embarrassed easily. I didn't know the language, but when I saw her struggling and getting embarrassed when trying to order something, I calmed her down, and we would make it happen. Neither of us knew how to order in their language. She was embarrassed the whole time, but she also smiled the whole time. She said she didn't feel afraid with me around, even though I was more lost than she was. We were at the airport, about to return back to the US when her father pulled me aside and suggested we get some food. We sit down at some random sushi bar, and he starts going on about how he loves his daughter. He mentions that all his life, he has tried to protect her and make her feel safe in the world, and that I was able to do that by just existing. He said that he has never seen his daughter in such an elated mood, and that he always wants her to feel that way. I told him that if making her elated is the least I can do, then I've succeeded, something along these lines. He started crying and said he never thought he'd ever see his daughter smile so much, and that it's something he wants to see in the future on a more permanent basis. There was some talk of marriage prior to this, but nothing serious. He then said, if your intentions are to marry my daughter, then you have mine and my wife's full support, and I would be honored to be your father-in-law. He then brought up money. I thought he was talking about the food bill at first, and I tried to pay it before him and said that he knows I'm struggling to pay college and make it by. He said that he has been living nice most of his life and that he only wishes the same for his daughter. He knew I came from a poor family with nothing to give, so he offered to pay for the wedding and the honeymoon and any other expenses that might come up, to include a house. I was speechless, but knew that I just made it into the inner circle. I'm the daughter, and my father isn't really a father, so my mother has filled all essential parenting roles. I had been dealing with ongoing health issues and told repeatedly they were normal. My partner kept pushing me to seek different opinions, and when he left at the beginning of the summer for work, I finally buckled down. Long story short, it turned out to be advanced cervical cancer. My health deteriorated quickly before surgery, and I was having massive amounts of pain. I was in the care of my mother, and she was filling in my partner as time went on. It was supposed to be a surgical cure, but they found the cancer had spread beyond my cervix, and I would need chemotherapy and radiation. At that stage they weren't sure how advanced it was. My mother called my partner to tell him the news and told him if he wanted to marry me not to wait. When I woke up to hearing that I wasn't cured, he was the first person I spoke to. He's home now and comes with me and my mother to almost all of my appointments. He bought a massage table to give me massages during rough days. He holds my hand when I'm feeling weak. He helped me pick out wigs. He takes my dog on runs when I'm too tired. I'm 100% sure that I'm going to survive this, and 100% sure that I'm going to marry the fuck out of him when this cancer battle is all over. Taking 2 stories from my sister of the successful proposal and a less than. Edit. Please note, these are 2 tales of 2 different fellows. Starting with the successful. My dad likes to gauge people based on their success. How well they are liked has little use for him, as he likes for people to be able to perform for him. So we look at this guy. He's clean, he's nice, cuts a little joke here and there, has a good job. At the time he was .25 and living at home, but was saving money to buy a house of his own. My dad saw him as a good guy, and he bought my sister stuff, so my dad's wallet was happy too. My sister can burn a hole in a wallet at an amazing speed. Holy shit. Anyways, time has passed, and the boyfriend is having a chat with my dad. Mr. Bidad 36, I need to ask you something. My dad dads him. He puts his newspaper down, looks at the dude, rests his face on his hand, and says sure. Dude asks if he has my dad's blessing to propose. And my dad asked him 3 times, more sternly each time. Are you sure? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. She's your problem now. Rewind like 0.2 years. The moment my dad realized that he did not want this guy to be his son-in-law were when my dad took them out to dinner. BF orders the most expensive thing on the menu, ate 1/4 of it, decided he wasn't hungry, and upon being asked if he wanted it boxed, he kindly told the server that she can put it in the trash. He left $1 on the table as contribution to the tip. The other time was when BF borrowed my dad's pickup to move a bed. Truck is a manual drive. BF apparently has a knowledge of how to operate it. The entire time he was driving it, he left the emergency/park brake engaged. When he got back he said to my dad, "Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of power to it, but somehow I made it work." I'll try to be brief with this. Dude went to the Navy, broke his leg during basic, hospitalized there till it was healed enough for him to get back to training. Writes my sister all the time. She writes him, blah blah. Meanwhile, at this point, the guy who would become her fiancé has met her and they've been talking. Then my dad gets a letter from Navy dude. It's a 2-page, pour my heart about his love and adoration of my sister blah blah blah, and he asks my dad's permission for her hand in marriage. My dad laughed and didn't respond. Because, at that point in time, in transit to the guy, was the letter my sister wrote, breaking up with him. Father of 2 teenage daughters. Perhaps it's their age, but I haven't viewed any boyfriend as husband material. Frankly though, it isn't my decision. Either I did my job helping to raise them as smart, critical thinking, independent women, or I fucked up. It is their love life, and with maturity and adulthood they must own it. I don't believe that I'm the guardian of their honor. I don't treat their brother that way, so I sure as shit don't think they are unable to own their own sexuality because they are women. I've told both of them who you sleep with or how many people you sleep with are your choices. If you are fucking guys because you are seeking some sort of validation or approval, that isn't a good place to be. If you are, have sex because you love someone, have fun and be safe. Hell, if you fuck somebody because they are good looking and you are horny, have fun and be safe. Now, due to my own twisted physiology, if someone was to harm any of my child, no matter their age, I don't care if they are 60 years old, you are gonna read about some old geezer shuffling out of the old folks home and doing some nightmarish shit to a body. I'll grab a guy by the dick, pull it tight, and then slam that pecker in a car door. And I'm not talking about one of those new age foreign metal car doors. I'm talking 1972 boot car door. I have 2 daughters, one is now married, and the other is most likely dating the man who she will marry now. The one who is married, I have to admit that I never thought this guy would make a great son-in-law, but he makes her happy, and he is a good man. He is not what I would have wanted for her, but it was never my decision to make. I told her when they announced their engagement that as long as she was happy, I'm happy for them, and that if he ever did anything that hurt her or caused her harm, she has my support. I'm not unhappy that she chose him or they chose each other, and they are good for each other. I couldn't ask for much more. My other daughter introduced me to her guy about 6 months ago, and I can see in the way they look at each other that they are going to marry. They just haven't made the commitment yet. They are both adults and don't need my permission or anything, but if he asks, which my other daughter's guy did, lol, I will gladly give it. Their mother and I raised them to be strong, independent women who could make wise choices. When they were little, I worried about them growing up, and if they chose to marrying a guy who didn't treat them the way I knew that they should be treated. Now that they are adults, I don't worry about that, because they were raised to believe in themselves and not depend on what others, especially men, told them that their worth was. I have seen far too many of their friends growing up and finding their worth in what their BF or husbands think of them, usually not in a good way. Most of the women in my family have really shitty taste in men. I had hoped that would all come to an end after my mom was brutally murdered by her husband for trying to leave him. No, it wasn't my biological dad, as he had already died 15 years prior. My eldest daughter found herself in a very similar situation, with the same cycles of moving out and running back to him. At one point, while she was away from him, she came to live with us and wound up getting friendly with a close friend of mine. He was devastated when she returned to the relationship and stopped talking to all of us. Well, the inevitable happened and another fight broke out. The phone rings at 3 AM and it was a detective from the town she lived in. I knew the detective, so it was a very personal call for me. He wanted to let me know that the BF had tried to choke our daughter out and had shoved her through a wall starting at her throat. I was determined to go rescue my daughter and quite possibly kill this cocksucker. As soon as my buddy knew what was going on, he insisted that he ride with me so he could help. He wasn't sure if he and my daughter still had a relationship, but he still cared enough to make sure she was safe. That moment, that was when I knew in my heart that this was / is the right person for my daughter. That was 4-ish years ago, and they are still together to this day. A couple of months ago he and I were out camping, and here it came. Okay, Mr. GTX, I understand that you are old-fashioned, and that it is customary to ask your blessing before I propose to your daughter. Do I have your blessing and permission? I couldn't stop smiling for the rest of the weekend. Now we just wait for the big day for him to propose. She longs for nothing more than being married, but he wants to do everything possible to make the proposal the most memorable moment of her life. Their relationship has obviously changed the dynamics of his and my friendship. I haven't lost a friend. I'm gaining a son who is also my friend. Best of both worlds. The icing on the cake is that my grandson absolutely adores him, and they get along great. Actually the son-in-law, but sort of answering for her mom, because dad passed when she was young. I spent a week with her in a lousy hotel in Niagara over New Year's, because the place we originally booked closed for renovations, and we got bounced around to several different places. We spend most of our time wrapped up in blankets watching shows and movies on her laptop. We visited a nearby wax museum and went around being total goofballs taking absolutely silly pictures with the dummies. We kissed under fireworks at the falls to bring in the new year. We spent a couple days hanging out with her family, especially playing games with grandma. When we were heading out, her mom asked grandma what she thinks of me. She hummed and hawed, and me being a smartass I said, "Who are you kidding? You love me." Considering how absolutely shitty that hotel was, and that she got sick halfway through the week, we still managed to have a blast just being ourselves together. After they dropped me off at the airport, they got back in the car and my now wife said, "I'm going to marry that man someday." Her mom said, "You know, I've never seen you with anyone who suits you and gets you more perfectly." She said that's the highest praise any of her boyfriends has ever gotten, because she never liked any of them. My wife basically says, "You won over my whole family in a week." She never said anything even close to that about any of my exes, or liked any of them, even the ones she knew for years. But to tie her dad back into the story a little bit, we agreed to get married on her dad's birthday, and mentioned him in the ceremony, which her mom thought was extra sweet. Can I go the other way? My mother-in-law, I knew exactly when. At my brother-in-law's wedding. There is an aunt. She never liked me, swore I was with my then boyfriend for money. She said a girl that looks like me isn't with him cause I love him. Well, at the wedding I made a very playful joke and she went off on me. I told my boyfriend what happened. I was really upset. He kept it quiet, didn't say anything to anyone. It wasn't his day to get in a fight. A week later, my mother-in-law calls me. "I just heard what happened at the wedding. Please know that Aunt Jane does not speak for anyone in the family but herself. You are good for my son. You make him a better person, and he comes out of his shell with you. Please know I personally am happy you are in his life." And a bunch of other sweet stuff. That was almost 4 years ago. We just got married 3 months ago. And her speech at my wedding made me break down. It was the sweetest thing I have ever heard. I hit the jackpot when it comes to in-laws. I'm so happy she is my mother-in-law. She is an amazing person. And the judgmental aunt had a blast. I was told by my Miel that even the harshest critics had a good time. Hopefully that means the aunt is warming up to me finally. Well, I can tell the story of my dad and my grandpa. Dad's Phil. For context, both of them are huge jokesters and love doing little pranks and tricks. Anyways, 4 years into my parents' relationship, my dad takes my grandpa outside, saying they have to talk privately. My grandpa was already kind of expecting a request for his blessing, which he planned to accept. They got along great. However, when they got outside, my dad let out a big sigh and said, "Rick, I think I'm developing an attraction for men." After seeing the look of confusion on my grandpa's face, my dad burst out laughing, then eventually asked for his blessing after things died down. But, all of a sudden my grandpa's face went stone cold serious, and he said in the most threatening tone, "You better be joking." My dad was taken aback, but after enjoying the shock on his face for a second, he burst out laughing, and said in his booming voice, "Two can play at that game, son," before pulling him into a big ol' bear hug. The next night my parents were engaged, and it seems like every Thanksgiving since the story has been retold. LMAO. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.